The desert is quiet now. Not peaceful. Just finished. The wind moves slowly across the sand, lifting grains that scrape against broken shields and abandoned helmets. Bodies lie where they fell. Roman soldiers. Thousands of them. Men who once marched in perfect lines now rot under an open sky that shows no mercy. Their armor is split. Their mouths are open. Some still clutch swords they never got close enough to use. The heat does not stop. It presses down harder as the day goes on. Flies gather. Skin swells. The smell of blood mixes with dust and sweat and fear that has nowhere left to go. This is what remains of an army that believed it could not lose. An army that followed a man who believed money could solve anything. Somewhere among the dead, one truth becomes impossible to escape. This disaster was not an accident. It was purchased. The man responsible did not grow up poor. He did not claw his way out of hunger or fear. He was born into advantage and turned that advantage into something monstrous. He did not fight for survival. He fought for recognition, for a name that would not be forgotten, for a place beside legends who were loved instead of merely feared. He owned houses. He owned slaves. He owned debts, favors, laws, and politicians. But he did not own respect. That hunger ate him alive long before the desert ever did. He convinced himself that one war would fix everything. One victory. One parade. One moment where the crowd would finally chant his name instead of someone else's. He looked east and saw not danger, but opportunity. Not enemies, but stepping stones. He crossed into a land he did not understand with an army that trusted him. And now those men are dead. Soon, he will be too. When the end comes, it will not be clean. It will not be heroic. There will be no last charge, no noble speech, no graceful fall. His death will be slow, humiliating, and unforgettable. A punishment shaped perfectly to fit the life he lived. Gold made him powerful. Gold made him arrogant. And gold will be the last thing he ever tastes. This is not just a story about the past. It is a warning written in blood and sand, waiting for anyone arrogant enough to believe that wealth is the same thing as wisdom. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Before the desert swallowed him, Marcus Licinius Crassus already owned half of Rome. Not in words. In reality, his houses filled entire streets. His slaves numbered in the thousands. His money moved faster than laws and reached further than armies. When fires broke out in Rome, Crassus did not run to help. He waited. He let buildings burn until their owners were desperate. Then he arrived with an offer so cruel it felt generous. Sell everything for almost nothing, or lose it all to the flames. Most accepted. That is how he built his empire. Not with swords, but with patience. With calculation. With the cold understanding that suffering is cheapest when people have no choices left. Rome admired power. Rome respected fear. But Rome did not love Crassus. That was the problem. Other men were remembered for victories, for speeches, for saving the state. Crassus was remembered for profit, for numbers, for deals made in the shadows. People needed him, but they did not celebrate him. They whispered his name. They counted his money. They avoided his eyes. And Crassus felt that insult every day. He sat in rooms filled with gold and still felt small. He watched generals return from war covered in dust and praise, and it burned him. Men poorer than him walked in triumph through the streets while crowds cheered. Crassus stayed behind, counting coins no one thanked him for. Money had given him power, but it had not given him meaning. So he decided to buy that too. The East called to him. Beyond Rome's borders lay the Parthian Empire, rich, distant, unfamiliar. a land of horse archers and endless plains, a land Rome had not yet crushed. To Crassus, it looked like a gap in history waiting for his name. He told himself it was about security, about protecting Rome from a rising threat, about strength, about order. But that was a lie. What he wanted was simple. He wanted to stand equal to the great men of his time. He wanted a victory so large that no one could ignore him again. He wanted the crowd to chant his name, not count his wealth. The Senate hesitated. The signs were bad. Priests warned him. The people murmured. Even his allies doubted the plan. Crassus ignored them all. When you spend your life buying outcomes, you start to believe resistance is just another price waiting to be paid. He believed the Parthians would break like everything else had broken before him. He believed money, discipline, and Roman pride were enough. He was wrong. As his army marched east, the ground changed. The air grew dry. The land grew empty. Supply lines stretched thin. Confidence turned into silence. Soldiers felt it before they understood it. This was not a place that cared about Roman rules. Crassus rode forward anyway, because turning back would mean admitting something he could not afford to face. That gold had limits. And so, step by step, he led his men closer to a future already decided. The war did not begin with an attack. It began with a decision. Marcus Licinius Crassus did not wait for Parthian armies to cross Roman borders. He did not wait for cities to burn or allies to beg for help. He moved first. He told Rome that danger was coming, even if no one could see it yet. He framed ambition as defense. That made it acceptable. In public, he spoke calmly. He talked about threats, about the future, about how Rome could not afford to look weak. He said the Parthians would strike eventually. Better to strike now. Better to control the moment. In private, there was no confusion. This was his war. He needed it, not because Rome demanded it, but because his pride did. He had spent his life winning without applause. This was his chance to finally earn it. To stand in history as something more than a rich man who knew how to wait. The army followed orders, not motives. Legions marched east through lands that grew flatter and harsher with every mile. Roads faded into dust. Villages became rare. Water became precious. The land felt empty, but it was not. It was watching. Crassus refused experienced local guidance. He trusted maps over people. He trusted numbers over warnings. Parthia, he believed, was soft, wealthy, disorganized, easy to break. He underestimated everything that could not be bought. The Parthians did not fight like Romans. They did not march in heavy lines or build camps at the end of each day. They did not care about occupying cities. They moved fast, like shadows. Their soldiers rode horses and carried bows that could kill from far beyond Roman reach. Crassus heard reports. He dismissed them. He had faced resistance before. Slave revolts, political enemies, fires. All of it had folded eventually. This would be no different. But the desert began to change his army. The heat crushed discipline. The sun drained strength. Armor became a burden instead of protection. Men drank less and spoke less. At night, the cold cut through tents and confidence alike. Still, Crassus pushed forward. Stopping would mean doubt. Doubt would spread. And doubt was dangerous. He needed momentum. He needed belief. Above all, he needed to reach a battle he could control. What he did not realize was that the Parthians were already controlling everything. They chose the ground. They chose the timing. They chose how close they would allow the Romans to get. Crassus was walking into a trap so wide it felt like open land. When the first Parthian riders appeared, they did not charge. They circled. They tested. They fired arrows from a distance and vanished before Rome could respond. Shields rose. Lines tightened. Fear began to replace confidence. This was not how Roman wars worked. Crassus gave orders. The legions obeyed. But for the first time in his life, money could not solve the problem in front of him. Influence meant nothing in the desert. Authority meant nothing against an enemy that refused to stand still. The war he invented was no longer his to command, and the price for that mistake was about to be paid in blood. By the time the battle truly began, Marcus Licinius Crassus had already lost control. The Romans stood in tight formations, shields locked, armor heavy on their bodies. This was how they had won wars for generations. This was how order defeated chaos. Crassus trusted that tradition more than any warning he had ignored. Across the open land, the Parthians waited. Then they moved. Not forward. Around. Horsemen flowed like water across the desert, fast and endless. They did not shout. They did not rush. They circled the Roman army slowly, calmly, as if measuring it. Drums beat in the distance, not to inspire courage, but to remind the Romans that they were surrounded. Arrows came next. Not a single wave. Not a charge. A constant rain. Arrows fell from the sky again and again, striking shields, arms, legs, faces. When Roman soldiers tried to advance, the horsemen simply rode away, still firing, never close enough to reach. The Romans were trained to fight enemies in front of them. Here, death came from every direction. Crassus ordered advances. The lines broke. Men chased shadows and died alone. When they pulled back, the arrows followed them. Shields grew heavy. Arms shook. The sun burned above them, watching without mercy. Hours passed. The Parthians never ran out of arrows. The Romans never reached them. Panic did not arrive all at once. It spread slowly, quietly, like heat sickness. Men began to understand that nothing they were doing was working. Discipline turned into fear. Fear turned into exhaustion. Exhaustion turned into collapse. Crassus watched it happen. He gave orders that no longer mattered. Signals were missed. Messengers never returned. The army he believed he commanded was now simply surviving moment by moment. At one point, Roman soldiers advanced too far. They were surrounded and destroyed in minutes. Their screams carried across the field and then stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Crassus felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Helplessness. He had never experienced it before. In Rome, problems bent. In politics, money spoke. In business, time always favored him. Here, none of that mattered. The desert did not care who he was. The enemy did not care what he owned. As the sun began to fall, the Romans formed a defensive square, bodies packed together, wounded men pressed against the living. Blood soaked into the sand. Arrows stuck out of shields like thorns. The Parthians pulled back, not because they were tired, but because they were finished for the day. They would return tomorrow. Crassus looked at the remains of his army and finally understood the scale of his mistake. This was not a setback. This was annihilation happening slowly. That night, the Romans tried to retreat. They got lost. Guides disappeared. Units separated. Men wandered into the dark and never came back. The desert swallowed them quietly. By morning, the army was broken. Crassus had marched east seeking glory. He found something else instead. A future where every choice left him with fewer men, less control, and no escape. By now, Marcus Licinius Crassus was no longer thinking about victory. He was thinking about survival. What remained of the Roman army moved like a wounded animal. Soldiers limped instead of marched. Wounds were wrapped with dirty cloth. Thirst burned more than fear. Every sound in the distance felt like the beginning of another attack. The Parthians did not rush to finish them. They waited. That waiting was deliberate. It let hunger and confusion do the work arrows no longer needed to do. It showed the Romans that their enemy was in control, and that control was absolute. Then came the offer. Messengers approached under a flag of peace. They spoke calmly. They said there was no need for more blood, no need for more suffering. They offered talks, a chance to end the war without further loss. To the soldiers, it sounded like mercy. To Crassus, it sounded like a way out. He knew how deals worked. He had built his entire life on them. Someone always wanted something. Someone always paid. He believed this moment was no different. He believed he could still negotiate his way free. Some officers begged him not to go. They did not trust the offer. They could feel the trap even if they could not explain it. But Crassus could not accept that the rules had changed. Power had always protected him before. He agreed to meet. As he rode out to speak with the Parthian leaders, something inside him shifted. The confidence that once filled him was gone. In its place was urgency, desperation, the need to end this nightmare before it erased what was left of his name. The meeting did not feel like a discussion. It felt like a performance. The Parthians spoke politely, but their words were empty. Their soldiers stood close. Too close. Hands rested near weapons. Horses shifted under armored riders. Everything about the scene was wrong. When tensions rose, voices followed. When voices rose, hands moved. What happened next was fast, violent, and final. Crassus was seized. Roman officers tried to intervene. They were cut down. The promise of peace vanished instantly, replaced by shouting and steel. There was no agreement. There never had been. Crassus struggled, but age and exhaustion betrayed him. The man who once controlled Rome with numbers and fear was now just another prisoner in the sand. The Parthians did not kill him immediately. That mattered. They wanted more than his death. They wanted a message. To Rome, to history, to anyone who believed wealth made them untouchable. Crassus had spent his life turning people into tools. Now he was the symbol, the lesson, the example. As he was dragged away, the remaining Roman soldiers watched from a distance, powerless. The man who led them into disaster was gone, and with him went any hope of escape. The war was over, not with a treaty, not with honor, but with humiliation. Crassus had crossed into Parthia believing he could buy glory. What waited for him instead was something far more fitting. The man who once believed nothing was beyond his reach now understood a simple truth. He had no leverage left. Marcus Licinius Crassus was no longer a general, no longer a leader, no longer the richest man anyone feared. He was a captive, surrounded by enemies who had no reason to respect him and every reason to make an example of him. They did not rush. They never needed to. Crassus was brought before Parthian leaders who looked at him without anger. That was the most frightening part. There was no rage in their eyes. No excitement. Only calm. The calm of people who knew the outcome before the moment began. They knew exactly who he was. They knew what he valued. And they knew how to end the story in a way Rome would never forget. Crassus tried to speak. He tried to explain. He tried to negotiate. Old habits do not die easily. Even now, he searched for a deal, for a way to trade something, anything, for his life. But there was nothing left to trade. His army was destroyed. His influence meant nothing this far from Rome. His money was useless in the desert. All that remained was symbolism. And symbolism was far more valuable than gold. The Parthians mocked his hunger for wealth. They spoke of his greed openly. They laughed at the idea that a man could love gold more than wisdom, more than caution, more than life itself. Then they decided how he would die. Not quickly, not quietly, not mercifully. They melted gold. The metal he had chased his entire life was heated until it became liquid, glowing and deadly. It was not enough to kill him. It had to mean something. It had to speak. When the moment came, there was no heroic resistance. No dramatic last stand. Only fear. Only understanding. Only the sudden, terrible clarity that this ending fit him perfectly. The gold was forced into his mouth. The pain was immediate, unbearable. The metal burned flesh, destroyed breath, erased any final words he might have wanted to leave behind. The thing he valued above all else became the instrument of his end. Greed turned into punishment. Power turned into silence. The richest man Rome had ever produced died choking on the symbol of his own ambition. His body was not treated with respect. His head was cut off. His legacy was turned into a warning. The Parthians did not fear Rome after this. They did not fear its money or its pride. They had proven that Roman arrogance could be broken. News traveled fast. When Rome learned how Crassus died, the story spread like fire. Not because it was tragic, but because it felt right. Because everyone understood it. The man who bought suffering had finally paid for it himself. There was no parade, no mourning crowds, only silence and the uncomfortable realization that wealth had not saved him. That ambition had not protected him. That power without restraint leads only one place. Crassus had wanted immortality. He got it, but not the kind he imagined. Long after the sand covered the blood, the story remained. That was the Parthians' final victory. They did not just defeat an army. They destroyed an idea. The idea that money could replace judgment. The idea that power could exist without limits. The idea that ambition, if large enough, could excuse any risk. The death of Marcus Licinius Crassus was not remembered because it was cruel. History is full of cruel deaths. It was remembered because it was exact, because it fit the life that came before it so perfectly that it felt inevitable. Rome moved on, as it always did. New generals rose. New wars were planned. New speeches filled the Senate. But something had shifted beneath the surface. The East was no longer seen as easy. Gold was no longer trusted to solve every problem. And ambition, when spoken about in public, suddenly carried a warning tone. Crassus had crossed the desert believing he was untouchable. The desert taught him otherwise. It did not hate him. It did not challenge him. It simply waited for him to make enough mistakes. That is how arrogance always ends. Not with opposition, but with exposure. The soldiers who died under his command were buried by time, not honor. They had trusted a man who believed his success in one world made him superior in all others. They paid for that belief with their lives. Crassus wanted to be remembered alongside conquerors. Instead, he became a lesson that power gained without restraint rots from the inside. That success can lie to those who have too much of it. That when a man spends his life turning everything into a transaction, he should not be surprised when his own life is treated the same way. There were no final words worth recording. No wisdom passed down. His ending did not add meaning to his life. It explained it. Gold did not fail him. It simply revealed who he was. The desert remembers that. It remembers the army that entered too confident and left as bones. It remembers the man who mistook wealth for destiny. It remembers how quiet everything became once the shouting stopped. And that is why this story survives. Not because it is ancient. Not because it is dramatic. But because it repeats. Different names. Different empires. Same mistake. Whenever someone believes they are above consequence, above caution, above limits, this story waits patiently. ready to be remembered again. The desert does not forget. It only waits. If you enjoy dark, untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.